So the X5 has been out for 5 or 6 months now, and Insta360 sent me one and asked me to see how it compares to this, the Osmo Pocket 3. And at first I thought this was a bit of a strange comparison, with these cameras being so different, but there must be some people out there who are trying to decide between these two cameras, and so this video is for you. I'm in Canada, and here the Pocket 3 is 719 Canadian dollars, which is about 520 US dollars, and the X5 is 740 Canadian dollars, which is about 535 US dollars. So the X5 is slightly more expensive, but not by much. If you're in the USA, look, my friends in America, you're going through some interesting times, and I feel for you, and I wish this wasn't the case, but for you, the Pocket 3 currently costs about $300 more than the X5. But in Canada and many other countries, these cameras are similarly priced. They're a similar size and both have the upright form, but mechanically they're very different. The Pocket 3 has a lot of moving parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if you count the joystick. The X5 essentially has no moving parts, making it much less fragile. The X5 is waterproof down to 15 meters or 49 feet, while the Pocket 3 is not designed to be exposed to water. The X5 has a larger display, but I do really like that the Pocket 3's display can rotate, though again, fragile. The X5 has a removable battery. The Pocket 3 has an internal, non-removable battery, but you could buy a couple of these external battery sticks, and although it makes the device comically long, the advantage that has over the X5 is that you can hot swap them, meaning you don't have to stop recording while you swap batteries. For me, the real problem with having a non-replaceable battery sealed inside is that after a certain number of charge cycles, the battery will no longer hold a charge, turning the camera into an expensive ornament. And if you use it heavily, that could happen within just 3 or 4 years. Now, to be fair, when my Pocket 3's battery dies, you can bet I'm going to break this thing open and find a suitably sized LiPo cell that I can solder in as a replacement. But I don't think the average user is going to be able to do that. So unfortunately, many of these cameras will probably end up as e-waste. The X5 has, for the first time, user-replaceable lenses. This is a pretty big deal, and it takes away a lot of the anxiety I used to have when using 360 cameras. If you're unfortunate enough to smash the lens, you can just screw on a new one. The Pocket 3 doesn't have a replaceable lens, but I keep this UV filter on mine all the time, and that provides a bit of protection, though not nearly as much. The biggest strengths the Pocket 3 has over the X5 are video quality, focal length, and background separation. The lens has a full frame equivalent focal length of 20mm, which gives it a field of view that's wide enough for vlogging, but not so wide that it's distorted. It has variable focus and an f2 aperture, which allows you to get some background separation, giving it a more cinematic look that's similar to larger mirrorless cameras, so you can capture some quite professional looking shots. You can add a wide-angle adapter which will give you a slightly wider FOV, but it's held on magnetically. It has to be removed before you turn it off, and it falls off if you bump the camera. The X5 is a very different animal. Instead of having one traditional focal length lens, it has 2 ultra-wide fisheye lenses. It won't be able to get you any background separation or intimate cinematic shots, but because it's a 360 camera, the list of creative possibilities that it can offer is relatively long. Because it can shoot a spherical video, you have enormous freedom when it comes to field of view. You can go with a more traditional look, or a bit wider, or extremely wide, and anything in between. Keep in mind though that if you want to export the shot in a more traditional field of view, the resolution will be lower, but I'll talk about that more in a minute. A big advantage of the X5 is that it records everything around itself in a 360-degree sphere, so you can capture everything and reframe what you want to show later. It also means you won't miss anything important, and don't need to point it at anything in particular. When it's on a selfie stick, the selfie stick is invisible, and this means you can create the illusion that you have another person doing the camera work, or that the camera is on a drone flying behind or above. With it offering so much creative flexibility and being waterproof and less fragile, the X5 is the more versatile camera, being useful for not just vlogging but as an action camera too. The Pocket 3 is definitely not an action camera. It's not made to be bashed around or dropped or exposed to water, but if your priority is video quality, you may find the next section important. Where the Pocket 3 loses in versatility, it wins in video quality. It can shoot in up to 4K 60 FPS, and the video quality is very high. The footage is clean, detailed, and sharp to the edges. Because of its variable focus f2 lens, you can get some nice background separation, which adds a professional touch to your shots. It can also record in 10-bit color, which captures more data and allows for more flexible color grading in post. The X5's video quality is not on the same level. If you use single lens mode and pick the widest field of view, you can get 4K footage, but it doesn't look nearly as good as the Pocket 3. If you want a less barrel distorted image, you'll need to select linear under your field of view options. That will give you a less fisheye look, but it crops in a lot and costs you resolution. Another thing to note is that on the X5, the edges of the lenses aren't sharp. Sometimes the footage looks a bit pixelated, especially in these stationary indoor shots filmed using single lens mode on the highest quality settings. In 360 mode with both lenses, it'll record an 8K sphere, but when reframing and exporting your final video, the resolution is going to be only a fraction of that 8K because it's only using a small portion of the sphere. Here's the Pocket 3 compared to the X5 after reframing and exporting with the least distorted field of view, which is linear. Both cameras can record time lapses. The X5 can record in 11K, but that's over the whole sphere. Your final reframed file is going to be somewhere maybe between 2 or 3K, depending on the field of view you choose when reframing. The Pocket 3 records its time lapses in 4K. Each camera takes a very different approach to stabilization. The Pocket 3 uses a mechanical gimbal for the bulk of the work, plus some very slight software stabilization to smooth out minor vibrations. The X5 stabilization is entirely onboard software. When walking, both cameras do a great job of getting stable footage, but when doing anything more aggressive, the X5 is miles ahead in that regard. Keep in mind though, the Pocket 3 isn't meant to be used as an action camera, so mounting it on a bike like I've done here isn't really recommended, but I wanted to show how each camera compares in bumpier situations. Here's the side-by-side comparison in low light. First with the cameras stationary, then when walking with them handheld. Both cameras are in their special low light mode. And it's dawn. The sun hasn't quite come up yet. So let's see how these two cameras compare. But let's see what it's like when we're walking and there's some movement. Let's see how the stabilization does when it's quite dark like this. Of course on both cameras it looks really quite bright, but it's 6:30 in the morning and the sun hasn't even quite come up yet. And it's much darker to my eyes than it is on both of these screens. This is how the Pocket 3's onboard microphone sounds at arm's length in a quiet room with no wind. This is how the X5's onboard microphone sounds at arm's length in a quiet room with no wind. The X5 is compatible with the Insta360 Mic Air, and this is how that sounds. It also lets you start and stop recording remotely. The Pocket 3 is compatible with the DJI Mic Mini, and this is how that sounds. It also lets you start and stop recording remotely. This is how the X5 sounds on a bike riding into a very strong headwind, just using the internal microphones. This is how the Pocket 3 sounds on a bike riding into a very strong headwind, just using the internal microphones. Here's a runtime comparison. So, two very different cameras, each with their own very different set of strengths and weaknesses. Which one is the better purchase depends on what you plan to use it for. If you want the best video quality, the best low light performance, and the possibility of creating some professional and cinematic looking footage, the Pocket 3 is the way to go. But if versatility is what you need, not just vlogging but also all the action stuff, and you like the idea of being able to record everything around you at once and choosing what you want to show later in post, the X5 is the better choice. If you found this useful or interesting, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.